Hello, my name is Susan Tierink, and I am the Associate Vice Provost for Financial Aid and Enrollment Services at Marquette University, and I will be your host for this financial aid presentation. Thinking about financial aid can be stressful. The topic involves your child's future and your money. Either topic can be stressful by itself, but in combination, it can be overwhelming. What we will try to do through this presentation is demystify the process, break down some of the unfamiliar language, and provide you with tools and resources. Here are the topics we're going to discuss in this presentation: the history and philosophy of the federal financial aid programs. We'll talk a bit about college choice. We'll discuss the forms, formulas, and how your family's financial strength is assessed. We'll go into a bit more detail about the FAFSA form and the types of financial aid your child may receive on a financial aid notification. The last few slides are just a list of resources really for your reference. When I give a financial aid presentation, I always begin with this slide because it's important for families to realize that they are responsible for education after high school. When the higher education amendments were written in 1965, it was assumed that families would have to sacrifice to pay for college, and that tenet holds true today. The financial aid assessment, or needs analysis, is an evaluation of an individual family's economic strength. When students apply for financial aid, their contribution is determined by a standard formula that is applied consistently and equitably. Families with more resources are expected to pay more, while families with similar financial circumstances are treated similarly. Willingness to pay is not a factor. Financial aid is here to help bridge the gap between the cost of education and what your family can pay. College choice must be rational. There's a college in every student's price range. I encourage students not to be distracted by brand names, but what really matters is fit. Students need to enroll where they feel they will fit academically, socially, and financially. There are several forms you and your child may need to complete in order to apply for financial aid. The first of these is the FAFSA form, or the free application for federal student aid. The operative word is free. There is no cost for completing the FAFSA form. It is the one form, no matter where your child decides to enroll, that is required at every school or university in order to apply for financial aid. There has been some perceived difficulty in completing the FAFSA form. However, the Department of Education has worked very hard to eliminate many of these concerns. It is available in both English and Spanish. There is help text embedded within every question, and skip logic means you and your student will only answer questions that pertain to you. The IRS data retrieval tool, which we will discuss later in more detail, allows you to transfer your financial information directly from the IRS and therefore reduces the time necessary to complete the application and eliminates any guessing or misinterpretation pertaining to your financial data. Most recently, the form has taken on a look and feel similar to that of a TurboTax application. It is estimated that it will take less than 30 minutes to complete for a first-time filer. There's another form that your child may be asked to complete called the CSS profile. The profile is used primarily at higher cost, highly selective colleges and universities to determine how much of their institutional resources your child is qualified to receive. The profile takes a much deeper dive into your family's resources. Both the custodial and the non-custodial parent may be required to provide financial information. There is a cost to file the profile. At last check, the first application is $25 and every additional school is $16. Fee waivers are available for low-income students. The final form that your child may be asked to complete is an institutional form. Some colleges may ask your child for additional information in order to help them determine what aid resources they may be qualified to receive. The process for assessing a family's ability to contribute toward post-secondary education is called needs analysis. It begins with completing the FAFSA form and results in one number called the EFC, or expected family contribution. Another way to think about the EFC is as an eligibility index, which helps the college or university determine what types and amounts of financial aid your student is eligible to receive. The goal of need analysis is to determine your family's financial strength, your capacity to pay for college over time, the big picture of your family's resources. Income is the single largest factor influencing your EFC, but all sources of income must be analyzed, both taxed and untaxed. Assets, as we mentioned earlier, allow for more choice. Before we dive into the details of how an EFC is calculated, let's make sure we are all on the same page with some of these terms. Your taxable income is reported on your tax return, so that's fairly straightforward. You are also required to report any untaxed income you may have. While not a complete list, the most common types of untaxed income include your annual contributions to your retirement or pension accounts, 401ks, 403bs, SEP, or simple accounts. Untaxed income also includes contributions to your health savings account and any child support received for any children. Assets also need to be reported on the FAFSA form. Let's start with two big ticket items that are not included as assets on the FAFSA: your primary residence and the value of your retirement accounts. You just heard me say a moment ago that you had to report your annual contributions to your retirement accounts as untaxed income. But to be clear, the value of your retirement accounts and the value of your home are not reported. So what assets are included on the FAFSA? Any stocks, bonds, and money market accounts or second homes you may own. When reporting your assets, you are reporting the net value of the asset as of the day you sign the FAFSA form. What do they mean by net value? That's the value of the asset minus any debt held against it. Remember, the value is calculated as of the day you sign the FAFSA form. One other asset you need to include on the FAFSA is the value of 529 plans. 529 plans are reported as the asset of the parent, even if owned by the student with him or herself as the beneficiary. It will become clear to you in a moment as to why these plans are reported as an asset of the parent. It is important to note that you must report the value of all 529 plans you own, even those where the beneficiary is another child in your household. Now that we have defined these important terms, let's dig into the FAFSA formula. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, both students, to the extent that they are able, and their parents are responsible for post-secondary education. Therefore, there are two components to the EFC: the student contribution and the parent contribution. Once both components are calculated, they are added together and result in the EFC. The student contribution is straightforward. The student's income is reported. Any assets that they might have are assessed at 20%. For example, if a student has $1,000 in a savings account, $200 is assumed to be available to help meet the cost of education. The parent contribution gets a bit more complex. Parents' taxable income is reported. As mentioned earlier, you must also report untaxed income. Please remember, while parental income is going to have the largest overall impact on the EFC, the amount of available income is adjusted by your family size. The more family members supported by the household income, the less discretionary income there is available to help pay for education. For example, if there are two family members in a household with an income of $60,000, more discretionary income is calculated to be available than in a household of 10 living on $60,000. The net value of your assets as of the day you sign the FAFSA form, including all 529 plans, are reported as mentioned earlier. However, unlike your student, for parents, assets are not assessed as a straight percentage. There are several different offsets that reduce the amount of your assets that are available to pay for your child's education. The first is an asset protection allowance based on the age of the older parent. The older you are and the closer you are to retirement, the fewer of your assets are available for educational expenses, as you will need these resources in your retirement. Available assets are further reduced by an asset conversion rate. When it's all said and done, parent assets are assessed at a lower rate, more in the 5 to 6% range than the student's straight 20%. Therefore, it makes sense that 529 plans are assessed as a parental asset rather than an asset of the student in order to reduce the amount calculated to be available to help pay for education in any given year. The last factor impacting the EFC is the number of dependent children attending college. The EFC is a calculation of how much you can contribute toward your child's education. If you have one student attending college, then the entire parental contribution is assumed to be available for that student. However, if you have more than one dependent student in college at the same time, the parental contribution is divided between the two students. Half of the parental contribution is assumed to be available for each student. If you have 3 dependent students in college at the same time, the parental contribution is divided among the 3. Finally, the student contribution is added to the parental contribution, and the result is the EFC. The next step in determining your student's financial need is understanding the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is defined in federal law and must include the cost of the 6 components listed on this slide: tuition, room and meals, fees, books and supplies, travel to school, and personal and miscellaneous expenses for a 9-month academic year. Every school must calculate the cost of attendance, and the cost of attendance will vary from school to school, but will always include these 6 items. It's important to understand that the bill you will receive from a school will not be for the entire cost of attendance. Your bill will be based on direct costs, tuition and fees, and room and meals if your student contracts for on-campus housing and meals. In summary, the institution determines costs, and need analysis based on your FAFSA data determines your EFC or your family share. Now that these 2 important components are understood, determining your student's financial need is a simple equation. Cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need. The college or university where your child is interested in enrolling will try to help meet your child's financial need through the various types of available financial aid. It is important to understand that a particular college or university may not be able to meet your child's financial need 100%. The difficult message of this presentation is, if the institution cannot meet your full need, any unmet need falls back onto the family to cover these costs. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. In these examples, you will notice that your EFC remains the same no matter what type of college or university your child decides to attend. In the first example of a public college or university, the cost of attendance is calculated to be $26,590. Your EFC is subtracted from the cost, and your student's financial need is calculated to be $16,590. In the private school example, the cost of attendance is much higher, largely due to the fact that tuition is not offset by state tax dollars as it is at a public institution. As mentioned, your EFC is the same regardless of the type of school your child attends, but their financial need is much higher at a private institution as the costs are higher. The calculation is simple, but the reality is, if the private institution cannot meet your full financial need through financial aid, any remaining costs fall back on you as a family. Let's talk about completing the FAFSA. In order to apply online, your student and at least one parent must obtain FSA IDs, which authenticate your identity and are used as your electronic signatures when completing the FAFSA. While the FAFSA is your child's application, your financial and household information as parents must be included. Therefore, both the student and his or her parent must sign the form. A FSA ID is a unique identifier tied to each individual and therefore should not be shared with anyone else for any reason. This is a screenshot of what you will see when you apply at the fsaid.ed.gov website. When you log in on the Start Here tab, which you will see on our next slide, make sure to select the appropriate school year, the 2021-22 application. There are 4 main sections to the FAFSA form. Remembering that the FAFSA is student-specific, the first section asks questions related to the student's identity and demographics. The next 2 sections refer to the students and their parents' financial information. When completing FAFSA, everyone must follow a standard process. So for students applying for financial aid for fall of 2021, you will complete the FAFSA using the students and their parents' 2019 tax information. Part of simplifying the FAFSA was the introduction of the IRS data retrieval tool. When completing the sections of the FAFSA related to the students and their parents' tax information, you will be asked if you would like to use the IRS data retrieval tool. If you agree, and I would encourage you to utilize this tool, you will be taken from the FAFSA to the IRS website. You will be asked again to confirm that you wish to use this tool. Once you agree, your tax information will be extracted from your tax return and entered into the appropriate questions on the FAFSA. This eliminates any misinterpretation of a question or any accidental errors. The right information is entered into the correct questions on the FAFSA. When the data comes across, it will be masked to protect your privacy and prevent identity theft. You will see a message that states transferred from the IRS next to each transferred data element. As long as you do not change the answers, the primary tax questions will be complete. You will still need to enter any untaxed income and asset questions when you get to those areas of the application. The final section of the FAFSA is entering the colleges or universities where your student wants their FAFSA information sent. A student may enter up to 10 schools at one time. However, if they are applying to more than 10 schools, they need to submit the FAFSA, wait a couple of days, and re-enter the FAFSA on the Login tab, remove the initial 10 schools, and add any new ones and hit Submit again. They can repeat this process as many times as they wish. Before hitting Submit, make sure to enter the FSA IDs for both the student and the parent, and keep copies of what you submitted. This is a screenshot of the FAFSA webpage, fafsa.gov. Here are some important reminders when completing the FAFSA. The application for the 21-22 academic year will be available as of October 1st, 2020. Please check with the college or university where your student plans to apply for any deadlines and institutional requirements. And use the IRS data retrieval tool, and don't forget to report your untaxed income. And it's important to note that a student must complete the FAFSA every year that they wish to receive financial aid. We have talked a lot about the fact that your information as parents needs to be included on the FAFSA. You are probably wondering both why and how can you avoid this. As we have discussed, the higher education amendments assume that the student and their parents are responsible for post-secondary education. So how can you avoid this? Well, you really can't, because traditional 18 to 24-year-olds are considered dependent for financial aid purposes unless your student is married, working on a master's degree or PhD, active duty military, a veteran, or has dependents other than a spouse that they provide more than 50% of that person's financial support, or they were in foster care or a ward of the court. While we are on the topic of parents, let's discuss whose parental information needs to be included on the FAFSA. The next slide is an infographic that walks you through who is considered a parent for FAFSA purposes. If a student lives with both of his or her biological and or adoptive parents, whether they ever married or not, that household income information must be reported. If the student's parents are divorced and the student lives with one parent more than the other, it is the household income where the student primarily lives that must be reported. By household, they mean the biological parent and his or her new spouse if remarried. The federal government, for FAFSA purposes, does not recognize prenuptial agreements. The new spouse's income must be included. The FAFSA asks for the marital status date as of the day the form is completed. If your parent is remarried now, but wasn't in 2019, and therefore didn't file taxes as married, the new spouse's income must be added to the FAFSA. Similarly, if you filed your 2019 taxes as married, but you are no longer married when you file the FAFSA form, you will need to remove your former spouse's income. So what happens if a student lives with neither parent more than the other? The student completes the FAFSA form with the household of the parent that provides the most financial support. The following people are never considered a parent for FAFSA purposes unless they have adopted the student. These include grandparents, aunts, uncles, legal guardians, or foster parents. Here's what happens after you file the FAFSA form. Your EFC is calculated, and the results are sent electronically to the colleges or universities your student selected, and you will receive a student aid report. A student aid report simply reiterates the information you submitted on your FAFSA form and allows you the opportunity to check your work. You will recall that everyone must follow a standard process when they file the FAFSA form. You use your 2019 tax information to apply for fall of 2021. However, your financial situation may have changed since you filed your 2019 taxes. A college or university has the authority to take a second look, to review your information. Common special circumstances include loss of income or high medical or dental expenses that are not covered by insurance. Here's the guidance from the FAFSA website. If your or your family's financial situation has changed significantly from what is reflected on your federal tax returns, for example, if you have lost a job or otherwise experienced a drop in income, you may be eligible to have your financial aid adjusted. Complete the FAFSA questions as instructed on the application, including the transfer of tax return and income information. Submit your FAFSA form, then contact the school you plan to attend to discuss how your current financial situation has changed. Please note that the school's decision is final and cannot be appealed to the U.S. Department of Education. After your child is admitted to college, the school not FAFSA, will send your student a financial aid notification letter. It is the school or university that awards financial aid, and you won't receive a notification until after they have received an admission letter. Finally, it's important to note that your student's application may be selected for a process called verification. Verification is a federal quality control process to ensure that the information provided on the FAFSA is accurate. If you utilize the IRS data retrieval tool, you will only have to verify the members of your household and the number of dependent students in college on a verification worksheet. However, if you did not use the IRS data retrieval tool, in addition to the verification worksheet, you will be required to submit a tax return transcript directly from the IRS to the school. Let's talk about the types of aid your student may receive on their financial aid notification. Remember, financial aid notifications come from the school, not FAFSA. If your child is applied to more than one school, they will receive a financial aid notification from all of the schools where they have been admitted and sent their FAFSA information. There are two main types of financial aid: gift assistance, which is free money and may be awarded on the basis of merit or financial need. The second broad category is self-help, student employment, for which the student must work and receive a paycheck, and loans, which must be repaid, typically with interest. Scholarships are usually considered merit-based aid and are awarded in recognition of your student's achievement, strong academic ability, a talent like music or the arts, or athletic ability. Again, this is free money and does not need to be repaid. Some scholarships require a specific enrollment and GPA in order to be renewed for future years. For example, full-time enrollment and a 3.0 GPA. I've provided the web addresses for a couple of outside scholarship search engines. These search engines are very robust, and I encourage students to use these free resources rather than pay an outside entity to locate scholarships on their behalf. While it does take some work on the part of your student to apply for outside scholarships, the payoff can be great. If your student is applying for scholarships, they should only apply to those where they meet the required criteria. For example, if a scholarship requires a 3.0 GPA and they don't meet that GPA requirement, applying will not be a good use of their time because they will not be considered. Grants like scholarships are free money. Grants, however, are typically awarded on the basis of financial need. Remember our simple equation? Cost minus EFC equals financial need. Most grants require that the student have financial need. The basic federal grant is the Pell Grant, and it is available for students with the highest financial need, an EFC of 5,712 or less. The maximum Pell Grant award is $6,345. SEOG, or Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, is a pool of funds given to a school to be awarded in addition to Pell Grant. Not every school will have SEOG funds, and those that do will not necessarily have the same amount of funds available. I encourage students who may be Pell eligible to complete their FAFSAs early and get to be first in line so that you have an opportunity to receive money from all available resources. TEACH is a grant available to students who wish to become teachers. In order to be eligible, a student must commit to teaching in a high-need school in a high-need subject matter for a specified period of time. If the student is unable to meet the required commitment, the grant becomes a loan with interest due back to the date that they originally received the grant. While this is a generous grant, I recommend that students be very certain of their career choice before accepting these funds. Wisconsin has a state grant program at all Wisconsin institutions for students who meet the need-based eligibility requirements. At private schools, the grant is called the Wisconsin Grant. In order to receive the maximum grant of $3,500, the student's EFC must be $14,514 or less. Students must be Wisconsin residents and enroll in a Wisconsin school. The grant does not travel out of state. Finally, many institutions, particularly higher cost private institutions, will offer need-based grants to help offset the higher cost of tuition. There are two types of student employment at most institutions: federal work-study and regular campus employment. When a student participates in campus employment, they work and receive a paycheck based on the number of hours worked and the hourly wage rate. The paycheck is given to the student. It is not directly applied to their bill, and the student may use the funds for any educational expense. It's a great way for students to earn their spending money. Federal work-study is awarded on the basis of financial need. Cost minus EFC equals financial need, and a portion of the wage comes from federal funds. While regular campus employment does not require financial need, so anyone can get a job, the entire wage comes from university funds. It is important to note that studies have shown that students who work part-time on campus, 10 to 15 hours per week, do better than their peers who choose not to work. Students who work are more engaged on their campus and develop time management skills. Student loans are considered financial aid. They are backed by the federal government and have a number of built-in safety net features. The Federal Direct Stafford Loan Program has two different components: subsidized and unsubsidized. To be eligible for a subsidized loan, the student must qualify on the basis of need. No interest accrues on a subsidized loan as long as the student remains enrolled at least half-time. After the student graduates or drops below half-time enrollment, there is a 6-month grace period where no interest accrues and no payment is due. Once repayment begins, interest will then be charged. Need is not a requirement for an unsubsidized loan, and therefore any student may borrow. Interest begins to accrue immediately, although the student may arrange to defer interest payments until after graduation. If the student chooses to defer interest payments while in school, the interest will accrue, and at the time of repayment will be added to the principal. This is called capitalization and results in the student paying interest on interest. Unsubsidized loans also have a 6-month grace period where no repayment is due, although interest continues to accrue. Subsidized and unsubsidized loans have the same terms. The interest rate is a variable fixed rate that adjusts annually on July 1st, but once a loan is borrowed, the interest rate remains in place for the life of the loan. The current interest rate for undergraduates is 2.75%. The standard repayment term is 10 years. The amount a student may borrow is set by their year in school. Freshmen may borrow $3,500, sophomores $4,500, and juniors and seniors $5,500. Everyone may borrow an additional $2,000 per year, but this additional amount is always unsubsidized. I'll highlight some of the other available options to help with meeting the cost of education. The Parent Plus loan is a loan that parents may borrow on behalf of their dependent children. While any student enrolled at least half-time may borrow a federal direct Stafford loan, the Parent Plus loan requires that the parent borrower be credit-worthy. Applying for the Parent Plus loan requires a credit check, but does not look at the borrower's debt-to-credit ratio, only if they have good or bad credit. The interest rate is also a variable fixed rate that adjusts annually on July 1st, and the current rate is 5.3%. The amount a parent may borrow through the Plus Loan program is the cost of attendance minus other financial aid. Through this program, parents may borrow to cover the cost of the EFC. Private alternative loans are non-federal educational loans offered through banks. Most national lenders offer a private educational loan. Rates vary and adjust per the schedule established by the lender, which may be annually, quarterly, or even monthly. These loans do not necessarily include the same built-in safety nets as a federal loan. We talked earlier about applying for private scholarships. If your student receives a scholarship, it's important to note that they must report all scholarships they are receiving to the school where they plan to enroll. Per federal regulation, all sources of financial assistance must be made known to your student's school. Most schools will also offer a payment plan. For a small enrollment fee, any remaining costs after financial aid will be divided into 4 or 5 monthly payments per semester. As long as the payments are made on time each month, there will be no additional charge. And be sure to take advantage of any tax credits for which you might qualify, either the American Opportunity Tax Credit or the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. And we talked earlier at length about 529 plans. The next 3 slides are for your reference, but there are a couple of items I will highlight. Every school has a net price calculator on their website to help you determine what type and amount of aid your student may qualify to receive. It's important to note that net price calculators provide an estimate, not a guarantee, of what your child may receive, so use this tool carefully. Think of it as a ballpark estimate as you are doing your research. On this slide, I provided some information on cost comparison tools. I want to highlight College Goal. College Goal Wisconsin is offering 6 dates in October and November when you can log into their event and get help with filing the FAFSA form. There will be financial aid professionals available to assist you with your specific questions during these events. This brings us to the end of our formal presentation. Best wishes to you and your students as they begin their college search.